Today we will be learning about the English Civil War. At the end of today's lessons, you should be able to explain how absolutism led to civil war in England and how the English monarchy changed as a result of the war. So absolutism in Europe. This should all be a review because it comes directly from the lesson we've already done in 4.1 on absolutism. So absolute monarchs are kings or queens who believe that all power within their state's boundaries rests in their hands. Their goal is to control every aspect of society. They also believe in divine right, which is the idea that God created the monarchy and that the monarch acted as God's representative on earth. So we're going to look at how this plays out in England. So there's a queen named Elizabeth I. She rules from 1558 to 1603. She was Protestant and she was the daughter of Henry VIII. She became queen when Mary I died with no heir. So Mary I didn't have a son or daughter to pass on the monarchy to. So Elizabeth I was the next in line. She worked really well with Parliament and she brought some religious tolerance to England. So at this time, there is some conflict around if the monarchy should practice Catholicism or practice Anglicanism, which is a Protestant religion. And she also died with no heir. So following her comes James I. He rules from 1603 to 1625. He was King James the VI of Scotland before he became James I of England. He was the closest cousin to Elizabeth, so because she didn't have any children to take on the throne, he was the closest. He believed in divine right and absolutism. He did not ask Parliament for permission, so unlike Elizabeth before him, he did not work well with Parliament. He was a Protestant leader who thought Puritans were religious extremists, and we'll get to what Puritans are in just a second, so hold that thought. Remember that word, Puritans. And he's also known for commissioning the King James translation of the Bible. So if you've ever been in a Christian church and they're talking about different versions of the Bible, the King James version came from this guy pictured here on the right. All right, Charles I follows him. He rules from 1625 to 1649. He's the son of James I. He also believes in divine right. He's Protestant, but he liked to worship and have huge, lavish, decorative ceremonies like a Catholic service. So even though he's Protestant, he likes the regality and the ornateness of a Catholic service. He was forced to sign the Petition of Right. This was an attempt to limit his powers in 1629. He also dismissed Parliament and began to tax without their permission, which is why they kind of forced him into signing the Petition of Right and limiting his powers. All right, so Puritans. I asked you guys to remember this word so that you could reflect on it again and that I would be explaining it to you. So Puritans are Protestant members of the Church of England, also known as the Anglican Church. They want to purify the Anglican Church by getting rid of Catholic influence. So they didn't like the big fancy ceremonies and stuff. They're like, we don't want to be associated with Catholics at all. Puritan members of the Parliament did not like James I or Charles I. So let's think about this, and if you need to pause in this part of the video so that you can think and write it down on your guided notes, please do that. How might the differing religious views of the king and the members of Parliament lead to problems? What other practice of the king's would members of Parliament not like? All right, so let's get into the Civil War, also known as the English Revolution. This lasts from 1642 to 1651, and it's largely the Royalists versus the Roundheads. The Royalists, also known as Cavaliers, support the king. The Roundheads support the Puritans, who are making a Parliament. If you guys don't remember from a few lessons ago, Parliament is very similar to what we have in America known as our Congress. They are the people who make the laws for England. All right, so this guy named Oliver Cromwell, he rules from 1653 to 1658. He is a Puritan leader, but he comes from the military. He's a general, and he's also a member of Parliament. He's the leader of the Roundheads as well. He's super, super religious. And then a war breaks out between Parliament and the monarchy. This lasts from 1642 to 1645. Charles I had an army in the north, but he made really big mistakes, and a lot of them. So again, Charles I is the monarch at this time. He's the king. So Cromwell and the Roundheads were highly trained, and they outnumbered the Royalists. So this would be the Parliament side. They have more people, and they're better trained, and they're not making all those big mistakes. So after the Battle of Marston Moor, Charles I fled to Scotland. If you remember, his dad, James I, was from there, so he went back to his roots. But Scotland was like, we don't want you here bringing all them problems, so they gave him back to England. And then the Roundheads win. So the Civil War is over. Charles I is accused, and he's brutally executed by beheading for treason. The Roundheads declare England a Commonwealth, which is a democratic republic, and it stays that way from 1653 to 1659. Cromwell was made the leader of the new government. He's not a king, but he does call himself Lord Protector. But he becomes a dictator. Womp womp. What a hypocrite. He was fighting for everyone to have rights and stuff, and he didn't like that the monarchs had all the power. Then he does the same thing, becomes a dictator, and has all the power. He forces his religious practices on the people of England by shutting down things like bars and theaters. He made gambling illegal, and he forbade the celebration of Christmas. Bah humbug. Cromwell dismissed Parliament in 1658, so he's trying to get rid of all the other people who could possibly take him out of power, choosing to run the country by himself. So super big dictator. Then the Restoration period happens. In 1660, Parliament voted to bring the monarchy back to England. They were tired of Cromwell's ways. They restored the rightful heir to the throne, who was Charles II. Big surprise here, he was the son of Charles I, who fled to Scotland and then got turned back over to England. So they put his son on the throne and began the monarchy again. So let's think about this and pause your video if you need to think and write it on your guided notes. Why would the British bring back the monarchy when they just fought a war to get rid of it? All right, so Charles II, he rules from 1660 to 1685. He restores religious tolerance. So he doesn't force everybody to be Protestant Anglican. He passes the Habeas Corpus Act, and that act said that the accused had the right to a trial. So if you had been accused of doing some wrongdoing, then you got to go and sit on a trial and be either prove your innocence or someone could prove your guilt. He was known as the Merry Monarch. Think about what not Charles I, but Oliver Cromwell did that had an association with the word merry. What did he take away? Charles II also was well liked by his subjects, which is another reason they call him the Merry Monarch. But another time to think question, what actions would Charles II have done to earn him the nickname the Merry Monarch? So James II rules after him. He's on the throne from 1685 to 1688. He is Catholic. Parliament was afraid that they would continue to fight with Catholic kings, so they want to get rid of him, and they want to bring in a Protestant monarch. So they forced him to pass the Test Act, which meant that no more Catholic monarchs could rule in England. So this leads to the Glorious Revolution. William and Mary ruled from 1689 to 1702, largely because James II was forced to leave because Parliament didn't want a Catholic king, and they brought in his Protestant daughter and his husband. That's them pictured there. The daughter was Mary, William was the husband. They signed the English Bill of Rights and formed a constitutional monarchy. A constitutional monarchy is a monarchy, yes, where there's still kings and queens, but also there's a constitution and parliament who are making laws that will govern the subjects, and it's not based upon divine right and absolute power. The people have the power. So this is the English Bill of Rights. Try to listen and see if any of these sound like the Bill of Rights that you know we have in the United States, because theirs came first. Freedom to elect members of parliament without interference from the monarch, freedom of speech, freedom to petition the monarch, freedom to bear arms, freedom from cruel and unusual punishment, freedom from taxation by royal decree without the agreement of Parliament. So how are these rights given in the English Bill of Rights? How are they similar to the rights that are given in the U.S. Bill of Rights?